welcome to another weekly edit. This one is actually the 13th video. Anyone who's watched the last video spotted my little boo-boo saying it was the 13th when it was actually the 12th. I was getting a bit ahead of myself, but yeah, this is actually the 13th video. Hopefully not unlucky for me, but you never know. This week I want to talk a little bit about white balance. I'll put a link up. There's if you don't follow him, if you love landscape photography, I think you should be following him, Alex Nail. Phenomenal photographer. I've followed him for quite a long time, but he posted a video, it's quite old now, I think it's about 8 years, I'll link to it, around white balance and what you should set your camera to. And he was specifically talking about Canon at the time, I believe, in his videos. I haven't watched it for a long time. Setting your camera to 5,500 Kelvin. And I've done that ever since, and I must say it works for me. Might not work for everyone, but I feel like I get consistent results all of the time, rather than relying on auto white balance or setting one of the camera presets like daylight, tungsten, etc. So, but however, that doesn't mean that my finished result stays at 5,500 Kelvin. I do use white balance as a creative tool. And this particular shot that I'm going to go through was one that I took on my visit to Truro one early morning. It was beginning of March, so it wasn't forecasted, but we had a little bit of a frost. It wasn't a heavy frost. In fact, walking back, by the time that I'd walked back to the car and walked past this shot that I took, the frost had pretty much thawed out. So it was a pretty light frost, but however, wasn't expected. It was quite nice. Opened up a couple of photo opportunities that I wasn't expecting that morning. So we're going to go into the edits. This is the shot here. I was just drawn to this. I don't know what this plant is, if I'm totally honest with you. But I was just drawn to this little cluster of leaves in the centre, kind of framed by this leaf here. So we'll go through the edit. As usual, I think my lens corrections, they're not applied this time. So remove chromatic aberrations, enable profile corrections. I had my 70 to 200 on at the time. Kind of wish I had the macro lens because that would have been better. But anyway, I couldn't get too terribly close. Although I'm not going to crop the image very much because although I like this bit in the centre, I don't mind these other elements of the image kind of supporting it. So I'm going to leave. There's not going to be much of a crop involved. And then you can see from the histogram, we've got a pretty good range right through from our blacks to our whites, which we kind of discussed in the last video as well. We've got nothing kind of clipping, maybe lost a little bit of shadow detail here in the black areas, but we don't need to see detail in these areas. So we'll go through the sliders. I don't think there's much highlights to kind of recover a little bit, maybe just a touch. I'm not going to lift the shadows because I don't. These shadow areas are giving me contrast against the white of the frost, which is just kind of heaviest on the edge of these leaves. So I will add a bit of texture and clarity because I think that's adding to the image in terms of we've got good texture in the leaves, for example. Bit of clarity, not too much, just to emphasize that sort of crunchy, frosty nature of the image. And whilst we're in this panel, we see up the top here we've got white balance, WB white balance, and you can see at the moment it is set as shot, and you can see my camera was set to 5,500. As I say, my camera stays like that all the time, whether I'm doing sport, nature, wildlife, landscape, portraiture, using flash, stays like that. Doesn't mean I don't change it in post-production, but it gives me a very good starting point. And a lot of the time I don't need to change it. But with this particular shot, although it's probably a fairly accurate representation of the morning, to me it doesn't come across as a cold image. That's what I want to represent. That's what I felt at the time. It was a cold morning. So that's what we're going to address in the white balance. I could go through the presets. So if I go through the presets, we've got auto. See what auto does. It actually warms the image up. So that's going completely against kind of the effect that I'm looking for. And we haven't really got an option for the conditions that I had that morning because the sun hadn't come up yet. So you could argue it's daylight, but it's not full daylight where the sun's influencing the scene. It wasn't cloudy, it was a clear sky. Arguably maybe shade, but shade kind of warms the image up. So there isn't kind of a preset. I mean, tungsten makes it the other extreme, really blue, just ruins it. There isn't really an option that kind of fits what I'm after. So then it's a case of just going with the temperature slider here, and we can go two ways with it. The slider tells us what's going to kind of happen. If we look at the slider, if I go to the left, it's going to more blue colour of light, and if we go to the right, it's going to be a warmer colour of light, and we can do that just by moving the slider. Now, as I say, for the morning, the feeling that I'm trying to go for with this edit is cold. So I'm just going to, not loads, not talking a lot, just pull down the temperature on it. The tint, it might be beneficial to take some of the green out because it is overall very green, but I might deal with that more with the saturation, but I might take some of the tint out, some of the green out, using the tint towards the magenta scale. So that's getting closer to kind of the look that I'm after. And then down here with the vibrance and saturation, I'm going to pull those down somewhere like that. So if we backslash, that's where we started. It's not a huge difference. That's where we are. To me, it's just a little bit more colder than how it started. I'm going to go back into this panel, look at my whites and blacks. So holding Option down, I'm just going to see what kind of whites I've got. So I'm going to try and emphasize that frost a little bit on the edges by just pushing the whites a little bit. Somewhere like that might be a little bit too much. I might take it back a little bit, somewhere like that. And with the blacks, I'm actually, some people want to see detail everywhere in the image. They don't want to see blacks. Personally, I'm not bothered about seeing detail in these areas of the image. If anything, I believe that by making these areas darker, I get white versus black, I get more contrast into the image. So if I hold Option down again and just push my blacks, I'm going to go quite extreme. I might have to come back on it a little bit. Yeah, somewhere there. So quite extreme. That might not be to everyone's taste, but that's kind of the look that I'm going for. I'm now, by increasing contrast, which is effectively what we've done, because we've increased the whites, we've pushed the blacks, that's naturally given us more contrast in the image. Contrast actually adds colour to an image. I know that sounds kind of a strange thing to say, but since I've done that, I can see that it's more kind of punchy. So I'm now going to go back to the saturation and vibrancy, and I'm going to push them down even more. Something like that. So that's where we started, and that's where we are. So next is just the crop. So when I'm looking at the crop, to quote a friend, I'm looking at Border Patrol. It might tell me off for saying that, but never mind. You can see down here that you've got sort of little bits like this that are creeping into the frame. So just going to take the crop tool. I'm not a massive fan of the 3:2 ratio that my camera produces when it comes to vertical. For me, the images just look a little bit long, which I know sounds silly, but that's just me. So I'm going to try a 4:3 kind of crop. And don't mind leaving this leaf in at the bottom. We've got a nice leaf coming in this corner. We've got another one coming in here. Just watching where I'm clipping here. Not getting too close to that leaf there, so I'll leave a little bit of breathing space. Somewhere like that, just keeping this one in this corner. We've got another leaf coming in this corner. But I am just going to pull it in a little bit on the left to just get rid of this little area here. So I need to readjust now, come up a little bit. Now because I've lost a bit of the crop on the left, I'm struggling to keep that in, so I might just lose that rather than trying to fight with it. Somewhere like that. It's keeping the subject, you know, this bit here, I like this bit of framing of these leaves here. It's keeping that fairly central in the frame, kind of on a third. Let's hit enter. Yeah, quite pleased with that. Let me know what you think. Last thing to do really is to sharpen. It may actually surprise you. I might go for a vignette in a minute. Let's sharpen it first. So again, just doing it by eye. Normally around that 80, 90 mark I find works. Don't want to introduce sharpening in this area here because there's no detail. So if I hold the option key down, do my masking, let's have that black. We don't need detail in there. That's my sharpening done. And then yeah, I am just going to go into my masking tools, take a radial gradient, and I'm just going to introduce a bit of vignette, because as I say, that this central point here is kind of what I want the eye to be drawn into as a photograph. So let's invert this mask. So if I click on the three dots, I can invert the mask. So anything that's slightly red, we can see it coming into these top corners, bottom corners, is what we're actually going to be impacting on the image. So with the exposure, I'm going to go quite heavy with it. Somewhere like that. So nearly 2 stops of exposure. Quite heavy vignette, but I don't mind that for this image. Yeah, I think that just helps contain the eye in on this area. Yeah, let me know what you think. Usual rules apply. I'll stick before and after up, comments. As I said in the last video, if there's anything particularly you want me to kind of have a look at, please just drop it in the comments or drop me an email. If there's any images you want me to edit, send them in, I'll have a go. I can't guarantee I'll make them great images, but I'll try. If there's a particular technique that you're struggling with that I can have a go at, let me know. Until the next one, look after yourselves, take care, and bye-bye.